This is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in. Now, have you had a struggle with being visible online? And is it actually your natural inclination to want to hide rather than be vulnerable and authentic? So many of us go through this process and are constantly having to deal with challenges and struggles of needing to be visible online, but also wanting to shy away from it. Now, my guest today is Lynn Coleman. She's a non-icky copywriter and copy coach who helps coaches, trainers, and healers grow their businesses. She's on a mission to help women find the words they need to express what they do and why they do it so they can support more clients. And in other words, she writes sales copy. But she's also an expert former hider. And listen in to find out how and why she became such an expert hider. Her motto is speak up so the world can listen, which I absolutely adore. And I love how our conversation's all about the challenge that we have as women to express ourselves authentically to actually make sales in our business. Make sure you stay tuned right to the end because her invitation to inspired action will have you moving from hidden to visible, literally in one day. And so let's go. Hello, Lynn. Welcome to Goals with Soul. So happy to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Jo. I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And I'm really pleased because copywriting is something that all of us have to turn our hand to. And when we got the opportunity to connect, and I thought so much about what listeners and myself need to learn, I was super excited about getting you to come on and share about your journey and particularly about what helps you when it comes to copy with your clients. So before we dive into all that goodness, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are and why you do what you do.
Right. Well, that's probably going to take us about 3 hours to get all through that story. But just to say what I do is I'm a non-icky copywriter and copy coach. And the reason I do that is because I know that a lot of people really don't like being salesy and pushy and over the top. And so I focus really on what techniques can you use that don't seem really over the top and really pushy. That's why I do what I do. And it's there's a long story going back from that. I mean, do you want me to jump into that straight away or?
Go on, give us a little taster. I always love a backstory.
Well, I call myself an expert former hider. And the reason for that is back in 2006, I actually had to hide for a year. That was because of a really nasty situation with my ex, which I will not go into because it's a long time and that's all gone now. But I literally had to hide for a year. So I was with my kids and trying to hide. And I learned so much about what you need to do to hide, which is basically pretty much impossible in today's world. But what it taught me was I got to a state of being hyper vigilant about being found, which most people never have to do, thank goodness. And if you do, you have my sympathies because I know what it's like. But then after things calmed down and the whole situation calmed down, thank goodness, I had to come back from that. I had to re-emerge from a state of hypervigilance and be visible again because I decided I wanted to start my own business.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. And as you're talking, I'm starting to resonate quite deeply with that. Although I don't have something as dramatic as that, it made me, even in this moment, start thinking about the ways that I've hidden in the past. I used to hide from clients when I worked in corporate, not literally because I couldn't, but whenever they would pop up on email, I'd be like, oh, I've been found. Like, what do they want? What do I need to do? How big a pound of flesh is going to be expected from me this time? Kind of feeling. So I'm starting to get the kind of vibe of how it's been that you've moved into
now being the complete opposite, right?
Yeah, because, when I started my business, I mean, part of the reason I started my business was because I look back at what I'd been through. I'd always wanted to start a business, but I look back at what I'd been through, and it made everything relative. So I decided, after all of that, what's the worst thing that could happen to me if I start my business? I could go bankrupt. And I thought, well, so what? There are worse things. And again, that's not the way that most people think about starting a business, but I'd been dithering about it for years. And that was what helped me actually start. So once I started, I then realized I was going to have to be visible. And that was a massive, massive thing for me. I set up a website and then didn't want to put contact details on it. I was so glad there was a contact form on it. Didn't want to put a phone number on it. I set up a telephone service. So when I did eventually put a phone number on my site, which took me a year, I mean, that's how bad it was. And, then set up a phone service in the hope that I wouldn't actually get, my ex phoning me and freaking me out. So, but then, of course, obviously, there's been big changes. We're talking about, I started this in 2009. So my business in 2009. And then I used to be in IT. So I was looking at everything that was happening and thinking, I've got to go online. I've got to go online. But if there's one thing you've got to be online, it's visible.
Oh my goodness, this is resonating so much because most of the people I talk to, in my own experience, at least at first, it's a massive leap into being visible in general and starting to be vulnerable and exploring what authenticity is. And whether that's not wanting to share your phone number like yourself, or simply not feeling comfortable sharing videos or photographs because of insecurities, or not really wanting to express your deep inner feelings because it's not safe. People might not like you. You might, if you're a people pleaser, it gets wrapped up, this visibility thing. So I'm so happy that you're raising this because it's time that we just face this head on, right?
Oh, we've absolutely got to do this. And especially as women, we've got to do this. And one of the things I learned when I started to come back from this and started to think, okay, I've got to go online, but what's going to happen if somebody sees me? And what happens if if I get nervous and I can't say anything, or if I say something stupid, or, all those things sort of going through my head. But, I realized that lots and lots and lots of people have this, and especially women. And I was hearing women say this to me again and again, that they were worried about being visible. And so I started to dig into this. Why is this? And I think it's a lot to do with how we've been brought up, that we've been brought up to adapt to others, to be in the supporting role a lot of the time. And the supporting role isn't the role that has the strong opinions and says things like they are and doesn't worry about what anybody thinks. So we've been adapting so much for so long. And there's a lot of great things about that. I mean, obviously, it's part of being a nurturer is adapting to others. So that's a beautiful thing. But we really do have to learn to give our opinions.
Oh my gosh, so true. It's like actually knowing that we are safe to give opinions and to share what's on our hearts. And ultimately to build a successful business in the online world as it is right now, it is required for you to resonate and for you to really show your future soul clients exactly who you are and how you help and why it is that you're right here doing this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that thing about safety, that's so important because as women, we constantly think about safety. We think about safety when we go out at night. We think about safety, should I wear heels or should I wear something else? It's a very deep thing that we think about all the time. It's at the back of our minds, pretty much all the time. So going out and doing something that seems unsafe goes against the grain of what we've been telling ourselves for, pretty much all of our lives. So, so it's sort of like a double whammy when we try and go online. We come across all kinds of old fears and we're going outside of our comfort zone as well, which is a great thing and something that we need to do. But, we need to do it step by step and take it,
Absolutely. Speaking about comfort zone, sort of matching that up with the vulnerability, but also the comfort zone of writing.
Yeah.
Now, I know that when, we first get into this, it is required of us that we actually get writing, whether it's sales pages, emails, content for social media. We have to get to grips with it quite quickly, because this is pretty much one of the, if not the most persuasive way, if we get it right, of actually creating a business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, we've got to be out there, we've got to be visible, and we've got to know what we want to say and how we want to say it. What I've realized is that being able to be vulnerable in a safe way, which I think is the key, is one of the best ways to be able to express yourself. And then you've still got to find the words, and you've still got to make sure that you're linking everything up together. So, it's great if you're going online and being vulnerable, but if you're not thinking about, okay, so what am I actually offering people at the moment, or how am I going to lead them towards something, then that's great. And it's like a sort of social service you're setting up, but it's not actually very good for your business. So you've got to know why it is that you're saying certain things.
Oh my goodness, that's pure gold, because I totally fell into that trap at the beginning, and I'm still learning around the idea of sharing is great, but actually there's a structure behind it to genuinely help people. And if you're going to help people, you have to bring them into your world for a paid service. You have to genuinely be coaching them. And going back to what you said earlier about non-icky sales, the reality is that how do you write and how do you create copy that is non-icky, but is also going to sell?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of elements that are really, really important for that. And one is be a human being. It sounds simple, but that has a lot to do with the safety and the visibility and the openness. Show you're a human being. Show what you've been through, what you care about, what you really care about, why you do what you do. So not just the surface, I like to help people do this, but, what did you go through that made it that important that you do what you do? Like with my story, I talk about being the former expert hider. That's because what I help people do is come out in the open and stop hiding. And that's why I tell that story. And that's why I care about it a lot. So, make sure that you're being human. Use curiosity. So a lot of the sort of traditionally, we're told to use techniques like, the FOMO, so that's any time that you try and make somebody feel like they've got to do something now, otherwise they're going to miss out forever. It works. That tactic works, even when we know we're being manipulated. Even when we don't like being manipulated, it still works, which is why a lot of people do it. But what I found out is the area of the brain that gets stimulated by fear. So you're talking about sort of an amygdala there, and you right in the middle of your brain, your reptile brain, also gets stimulated by curiosity. So if you drop like little curiosity bombs, people start thinking, well, what is that then? So how does that work then? What's she about to tell me? So I use those a lot. So I'll say something like somebody, but I'll tell you about that. Oh, I found something really interesting out, but I'll tell you about that later. And then don't tell them about it until later. And then people are thinking, well, what is it then? What is it then? And it's still, in a sense, fear of missing out, but it's fun fear of missing out.
I love that. Because obviously scarcity is really inbuilt in our industry. And I totally hear what you're saying. It's done many times. I've used it myself in the past, in past launches. But what you're saying, I can really feel very personally, because I recently changed my model to evergreen. And I'm very open when I talk to people who are exploring working with me, that there isn't a cart close here. And I'm open all the time, because it might be their right time to join me, not today, but next week or next month and so on. And it's the first time actually I've thought about it in the terms of how you're putting it, which is obviously intuitively, I haven't liked those tactics, and I've wanted something more spacious and more in integrity with the way I like to be treated when I join programs and so on. So that's a really fascinating way of putting it. And I hadn't thought about it in terms of copy and how to create that curiosity instead.
Yeah, I was so excited when I found out about that, because I thought, this is how we can do this. So create curiosity in your posts just to keep people reading. But you can also create it in the way that, for example, you talk about your program. You don't have to give everything away when you describe it. You can also talk about things and we'll go into more detail during the program. As long as it's got a really cool name that makes people think, then you've done what you need to do. And people don't react negatively to that. So people feel okay about that. It's, oh, give me more. That's a sort of give me more impulse instead of I don't want to miss out. And those two things feel very, very different.
Yeah, that's a really interesting distinction about the energy of it. And look, let's be honest, different things work for different people. And, somebody listening in has got a particular audience that they might find that actually those fear of missing out, cart closing 2 days, book now, discounts is actually very motivating. And in this world, we really want people to come towards transformation. And sometimes those tactics work, but not for everyone. And I love the fact that there is another way. We don't all have to channel ourselves in one particular direction, like cookie cutters of each other, of how we produce our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And you shouldn't try and be a cookie cutter. In fact, somebody said something to me a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was really fascinating. And, I'm telling everybody about it. That what happens when we try to become visible is that we quite often become invisible, because what we're doing is trying to be like everybody else. We look at how everybody else is doing it. We think, oh, well, they're making money. That must make sense. I'll do that too. But then we lose ourselves in the process. So you should absolutely not be doing cookie cutter and trying out what works for you. And that's a process of testing again and again until you've got the right thing.
Oh my gosh, so true. Because that was exactly what happened to me when I first came into the industry. I was looking at idols like Amy Porterfield, for example. And I was saying, well, this is what works for her. So I guess if I just do this, then everything will be great for my business. And I had a launch which was disappointing following her methods. Now, by the way, she's amazing, but I had not found my authenticity in the process. And it was only later when I actually realized what my message was and the pieces of all of my truths that came together and made me the best person to help some people to make their transformation into their authentic message, that I found my business really started to take off. So it's not about copying what others are doing. It's about being inspired by some of the tools, techniques, and strategies, but finding your unique flavor amongst that. So that's the only way to go ahead. And your story about the expert hider just ringed all those bells for me. I love how you've brought something that was actually a very difficult period into being an absolute advantage for your business and for the people that you serve.
Yeah, I remember it was back at that time, and I don't know where that thought came from, but I was in a women's shelter with some people I would not have met otherwise. Let's put it like that. In a women's shelter. And I thought, this is my story. And I had no idea what I was going to do with that story. At that point, I didn't have a business. I wasn't thinking about starting a business. And I just had this thought, this is my story. I'm going to have to do something with it later. Okay. Then I just put it away for a while. But yeah, it's those unique elements are what make you human. And people will relate to that or they won't relate to that. And that's why it took me a long time to be able to feel comfortable to talk about this, because I was vulnerable for quite a long time. I had to feel strong enough to be able to share it. And I had to find my way to share it, which, by the way, if anybody's listening, the solution I came up with is I don't actually talk about all the horrible stuff that happened. I talk about my journey. So that made it a lot easier for me to talk about, because who else can, who can judge my journey? Well, they can, but it's my journey. And, if you don't like it, that's fine. So that made it easier for me to talk about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you work with entrepreneurs and coaches who are first moving into this space of wanting to be vulnerable and authentic and show up in their copy, what are the kinds of things that really help them make that initial transformation from what's probably quite robotic copy into something that truly starts to resonate?
Well, what I start with everybody I work with is who they are. It all starts with you. It starts with who you are, why you do what you do, your unique set of experiences and skills. I'm always amazed by the skills that my clients have, and especially the combinations of the skills. That's where the gold is, the combinations. So it starts with that. And a lot of the time, we don't see what we're amazing at. We don't, because it's so normal for us. I think, anytime you get a compliment and you're sitting there thinking, well, why are they even saying that? Or why would they mention that? That's your gold. And that's what you should be talking about.
A woman after my own heart. That's exactly the central tenet of what I teach so many of my clients. And so many of us, myself included, and you, like, don't see it at first about all of these amazing qualities that we can bring together and actually create a unique business that might be doing something that others have done before and many others are doing right now, whether that's copywriting in your case or business coaching in my case. It's about the complete uniqueness of what you do that makes you right for certain clients and completely wrong for others. Talk to me a little bit about that repelling thing, because I know people are quite scared of that. That's like, what if I say something that repels prospective clients?
That's a good thing. It's a good thing because if you're not repelling certain people, you will have to work with them. And if they're not your people, that will be hard work. So you want to know who your soul clients are, and you also want to know who definitely aren't your soul clients and make sure you repel those.
Wow. The point is that when people are first launching their businesses or they're not at the income level that they want to be, there is this scarcity mindset and you don't want to turn clients down. But anyone that's experienced working with clients that are an energetic mismatch are going to know that very quickly that's not the route that you want to go down. I've experienced that myself, and it was a real learning experience. I'm really grateful for it because it taught me so much more about how I wanted to hold my boundaries and also the types of client that is my soul client. The people that not only I create great results for, but I feel lit up in the process as well. And that energy exchange is so vibrant. It creates something far bigger.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a wonderful thing to experience, isn't it? When you're bouncing ideas off each other and you come away from a session and you think, oh my God, I learned so much from that session with you. And they also have that same feeling. That's a wonderful thing. As against spending time with somebody you think, oh God, I've got to go to that meeting with that person again. That's no way to live. I mean, you don't start a business to feel like you're working for a boss and not having a choice. You start a business so you can have a choice. And obviously that's a process. It's not an overnight thing, especially if you've come from corporate. It takes you a while to get into that mindset.
Yeah, 100%, because that was my experience in corporate, where you're having to do things that you're not energetically aligned with and you would rather not, given a choice. But for many of us, and I know you come out of corporate too, I'm curious, I would like to ask you if you also found that when you first started building your business, you didn't put those boundaries in place and you kind of took a lot of that toxic ideal from the corporate space and just transplanted it into your own business?
It's not something I've ever thought about before, but I think you're right. I saw myself in terms of, what I definitely done was take for some of the ideas that are celebrated in corporate, like being flexible. And I definitely suffered from that one for quite a long time, that, it's really important to be very, very flexible. But if you're always being very, very flexible for other people, like corporate environments want you to be, then you can't cope in business. It sort of gets completely exhausting. So I definitely took that one over. And what I really had to learn to do when I came from corporate was not judge myself in terms of my income, because I had a very nice income in corporate, and that had got under my skin and become part of my story of who I was and my self-confidence. And then I started working for myself and I wasn't bringing in that same income, and that got to my self-confidence. So I had to completely readjust my idea of, okay, so what makes me me and what's good about me? And, and my bank balance is not directly related to my sense of self-worth. I had to sort of unhook that.
I had exactly the same experience. And I now speak a bit more openly about the industry and how so often we're fed this idea that you should be hitting six figures in your first year and you should be having six-figure launches and so on. And whilst it is possible, the vast majority of online entrepreneurs who go on to have absolutely thriving, lucrative businesses don't have that straight out the gate experience, that we're made to feel less than if we're not the ones that achieve that straight away. And when I allowed myself to let that go and to be the bamboo of online business, be the someone that has to do the work first and get all the pieces in place and become that person. That's where everything got a lot easier. And I started seeing the progress. And sure, the income started to increase, but it was more aligned with me being ready to serve in a higher way, in a bigger way, and be that person. Is that a similar experience for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you shouldn't underestimate the change that you've got coming from a corporate environment to working for yourself. One of the things I found was a big challenge. I'd been a project manager and a program manager and working in IT and things like that. So I was used to responsibility and getting things done in the corporate world. But when I moved over to working for myself, I realized that my trust in myself had to increase like 1,000%, because, in a corporate environment, you do what you do. Whatever happens, you get paid at the end of the month. And if you're working for yourself, you have to believe that something is going to work and do it. And then you see whether it's going to bring any money in or not. And then, and if it doesn't bring any money in, then you have to decide, okay, so what was wrong with it? What do I need to adjust with it? Do I keep going in the belief that it is going to work? Or do I change something? Or, the level of trust in your self-belief that you need is incredible. And that's, to me, is, I think, the biggest change of all.
Oh, 100%. Because I chose the word trust as my word of the year in 2021, because that was my exact experience too. I just had to trust that I was going to get where I needed to go by putting one foot in front of another. And just having that certainty means that you just keep showing up. Because another thing that I've discovered recently is that those people that really make it in the online business are the ones that just keep going. And so many fall by the wayside. You just give up. You're like, oh, it's never going to work. I need to go back and get a 9 to 5, or I need to change entirely what I'm doing. But those that really get thriving businesses are often those that say, I just kept trusting. And yes, it took 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to actually get where I wanted to go, maybe even longer, but I never wavered because I always knew it was my destiny and I always knew that it was going to work out. I work at making sure that I'm really integrating that as part of my own story, especially when I feel wobbly, which is frequently, right?
Yeah, we all feel wobbly. I mean, we're human beings. It's not like you never get out of bed in the morning and yes, it's another wonderful day and I'm going. And we're not all Tony Robbins when we get out of bed. You have to be conscious about that and make sure that you're working with that every day. And you don't let your mood slip, and you do things to feel better, even if it's dancing around the room, which is what I do quite often. It looks terrible, but nobody sees, and whatever it is that you need to get your mood up to keep going, you just have to keep going with it.
Yeah. And I hear from reliable sources that even Tony Robbins doesn't get out of bed like Tony Robbins most mornings.
I hope not.
Which is why he has a plunge pool and all of the other things that he does. And it's about being consistent and staying as best as we can in a high energy state to keep moving forward with trust. I really love that you've raised that.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest thing. And something else that's worth mentioning as well. Have you read the book The Dip?
I have. Great book.
Yeah. So I think it's Seth Godin, isn't it?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So he talks about the fact that success often comes after a dip, and it's at the dip that most people stop and they don't continue. And that's why less people is partly why less people are successful, because a lot of people stop when they get to the dip. And you've just got to keep going. And that's why, as well, for me, it's so important that you do something that you love and that you really care about. So, going back to what I said about when you start writing copy is with who you are and why you do what you do. That works at so many different levels. It works in your copy, but it also helps to keep you motivated when you're having a wobble. You think, okay, come on, Lynn, this is why you're doing it. Let's get going.
And in the dip, one thing that really resonated with me was that it isn't a one-time thing. Oh, I had a dip 2 years ago and luckily I just kept going. it just keeps coming. You go through, I think there are 4 or 6 stages that Godin identifies. But one of them is you're always heading down on the roller coaster and then you head back up and down you go again. And I think I had a shock moving into entrepreneurship that this just kept happening. I felt that I wasn't normal. Something must have been wrong with me. But actually, it's completely normal because you ride high and then you go back down again. And it's getting used to those waves and managing them and being able to pull yourself out the dip that really makes that difference.
Yeah, I've been looking into neurochemicals recently and how they affect our behavior and also how we can use those in copy. Something I'm going to do some more research into in the future. But basically, when you get like a happy emotion, it generally doesn't last very long. So, you can have worked on a launch, done a fantastic launch, and then you feel amazing. And that evening you feel incredible. And the next morning, it's probably not there anymore, that feeling.
Or even worse, you have a crash that makes no sense. And that happened to me just recently. I had some really quick success in something that I wanted to do. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm getting the responses I want. I'm getting the sales that I want. And within 2 days, I was feeling really low and I couldn't really understand it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a normal neuro response, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. So you get the high, especially if you've done something new. Or if you've done something that's, maybe better than you've been able to do before, you feel like your status is going up. You get a hit from that. But then there's always something waiting. Our basic state is not that high state. And that's why, Tony Robbins hammers on about, you have to, jump in the pool or do whatever it is every morning. There's no way I'm jumping in an ice cold pool every morning. That's just never going to happen. But it is important to know that, and that's how our brains work, and we have to manage them, and we have to get back into that energy and keep going. And one of the things that helps do that is remembering why it is you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And how can we use that kind of high neuro state to benefit our copywriting? Because a lot of us will come to copywriting as a bit of a chore. It's like, oh, I need to sit down and do some posts for social media, or I have to write an email for my list, or I have to create a sales page, whatever it might be. Do you have any pearls of wisdom about what works best in that way?
Well, something I've been thinking about with my clients recently is when they're writing, thinking generally about what kind of emotion do you want to create with your audience? What do you want them to feel when they're reading, they're reading or listening to you? So, and then using words that reflect that feeling, making sure you're using those kind of words in your copy. So that's one thing you can do. And it always helps to write copy if you're in a good mood. The higher your mood is, the better it's going to be. That's not all of copy, because copy is also a lot about structure and knowing what to do when. But the sort of the mood, the creativity, that's really going to be helped by being in a good mood. So if you want to write copy and you're feeling a bit, I don't know what to do, think about the structure first. Why are you writing this piece of copy? Always think about why you're writing a piece of copy. If you don't know why you're writing it, then you probably shouldn't be writing it. There's always an aim to every piece of copy you write. So think about that. And then if you're not in the mood to do it, I literally would do something like go off and dance or play with some small children or something that's going to change your mood, so you're feeling more playful.
Yeah, I was really struggling to get some great copy that made me feel really proud of what I'd written, and I knew it would resonate. And I realized that when I was walking around the forest, which I do most mornings, that's when I felt in my really high creative state. And I frequently recorded podcast episodes. Many people listening might know that because you hear the sound of the birds in the background, because I'm just feeling excited and I know that I've got something to share. But also recently I've been using the speech to text app in my phone, or even just recording and then transcribing and actually speaking my long form copy into something that I know I want to turn into an email. And I literally speak it when I'm in this high vibration state, get home, edit it or transcribe it, whatever needs to be done. And it's fully formed. And it took me literally minutes. So that's something that's changed the game for me quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a great way of doing it as well. But is that getting into that state beforehand and, knowing what it is you want to do, and absolutely use those tools. Tools are there to be used. So, that speech to text, brilliant. It's on Word as well. I use it in Word quite a lot. It's really, really useful. And if you're doing things like posts and emails, you can have fun with it. I mean, it doesn't have to be serious. So, use that curiosity, use some humor, show that you're human, throw in emojis, throw in, different weird and wonderful words. It's all okay.
And then how do you actually take them through to selling using your copy? Because I think when we talk about non-icky sales, we're like, well, how do I actually introduce the fact that I have one-to-one sessions or a program or a workshop or something like this coming up? And people often shy away from going there. When they think about call to actions, they'll be like, oh, I'll just put like hit reply and let me know something, which is great because engagement's important and relationships are important. But then how do you actually get them through to the sales thing using copy?
Well, I mean, there's no one answer to that, unfortunately, because it's completely different in what situation you're in. Are you making posts? Are you writing emails? Is it on your website? Whatever it is. The main thing to remember, though, is that the likelihood of somebody seeing your beautiful face and buying a high ticket offer from you in the same day is not great. And if they do, I had that happen once and she cancelled the next day. So I'm not sure it's actually the way for it to go. So it's not generally going to go that way. So people will need to get to know you and they will need several times of interacting with you in different ways, or maybe just lurking. People lurk as well. And that's perfectly fine. You've got to sort of, to a certain extent, I think, talk about what you're doing, but you're not ramming it down people's throats. So it's perfectly fine to talk about what you're doing. And, there are a lot of theories that say in every email you send out, you should be talking about something that you sell. And it should be so normal that you're talking about something that you sell that people don't get offended by it because it's always there. So it becomes a bit of a background thing. But when they're ready to buy from you, it's there. So that's one tactic that works in emails. Yeah.
Oh, that makes so much sense. That's definitely something that when I work with clients, it comes up very frequently. And I agree so much that we have to build that resonance first. And that's the bit that can be so difficult to start with. So it's good to know that it's just normal to start being visible, start being authentic, and start really sharing your message through the medium of copy.
Yeah, absolutely. Just share as much as you can. And don't be afraid that you're sharing too much because, especially things like on social media, people won't see it all the time anyway. So it's okay. Keep sharing it. Also, a lot of the time, they don't even mind if you repeat things. If they resonate with it, that's fine. So don't worry about boring people.
That's a really good tip because oftentimes we put one thing out and we think, well, I've done that. How can I repeat it again? Even to the point of resending to people who haven't opened your emails and things like this. We can use our copy to share our message on repeat. We don't have to just say it once and think that it's been done.
Oh, absolutely. And you should be reusing your copy because that's gold. I mean, you've created something great, reuse it. And if you're not reusing it in the same place, reuse it in a different place.
What I love to do in Goals with Soul is always at the end of every episode, I like to invite listeners to take some inspired action. And we talked about so many amazing tips about creating copy. Lynn, would you be kind enough to share some inspired action that any of us could take today or this week?
Well, this is something, if you haven't done this very often before, what I'd like to invite you to do is in a post, share why you do what you do and really talk about it. And then notice how you feel about that sharing. So you don't have to get to be able to share everything in one go. So I want you to just notice how you feel about that sharing. And are you holding back on something? It's just information, yeah? And then make sure that you share it at a time that people will see it. So don't share it at 3:00 in the morning or anything like that. Share it at a time when people will see it, talk about it, add in a photo or a video, whatever you want to do, and then see what reactions you get. And the other thing I'd like you to do is count the positive reactions, because there might be one person who basically is a test who reacts negatively. But if you've counted the positive reactions, then you'll see, okay, so we have a tendency to focus on the negative when in reactions. But if 10 people think it's great and one person thinks it's not so great, who are you going to focus on? So that's what I'd like to invite you to do.
Powerful stuff. I love it already. And if you do that on Instagram, tag myself and Lynn, and we will yay to your sharing, because it is time to be seen and time to really explore who you are with your audience. So Lynn, it's been an absolute pleasure. If somebody would like to learn a lot more about what you do, where can they find you online?
Well, the best place is to come to Instagram, and there you can find me at your.epic.business. And I've got a freebie there as well if people are interested, a free gift, 10 sales page essential. So you can't forget what needs to go on a sales page.
I have taken a look at that, and it's an essential list. So you can find that on Lynn's Instagram link. And also you'll find details of that in the show notes. So you can pop down there and click on the links too. Lynn, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're so welcome. It's been lovely, Jo.
Take care. Bye. So those are the words of the Non-Icky copy coach. Just to recap, first of all, in your copy, be human. Talk about what you really care about and also what you've been through. Use curiosity, not necessarily scarcity, to invite your clients to get closer to what you're actually selling. And don't be like everybody else. You are uniquely you, and this is an opportunity through copy for you to really show it. People need to get to know you. So talk about what you're doing and what you're selling natively and naturally in your content. And lean into trust that as you're developing the skills that you need, you will build your business one step at a time. If you've enjoyed this episode, please drop into Goals with Soul on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. You can also hit subscribe to make sure that every episode lands in your downloaded folder so you don't miss a thing. Have an inspired action week. Take care. Bye now.